I'd like to call to order the Peabody Planning Board meeting agenda for Thursday, December 5th, 2024, held 7 p.m., Peabody City Hall, Wigan Auditorium, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass. This meeting will be broadcast through Public Access TV. At this time, I'd like to suspend the meeting and enter into the first public hearing. Pursuant to Massachusetts General Law C-40A, Section 5, the Peabody Planning Board will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m. City Hall, Peabody, 24 Lowell Street, remotely via Zoom, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, to consider amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Peabody map to create a new multifamily overlay district pursuant to Chapter 40A, Section 3A, which would allow multifamily dwellings by right and amend the zoning map to include certain parcels identified within the proper overlay district of the following areas are to be considered for instruction overlay district. District 1, 0 Dearborn Road, map 089-10X, and 7 Dearborn Road, map 078-019. District 2, 1 Brooksbury Village Drive, map 027-005. A copy of the full text of this proposed amendment and accompanied by a map may be reviewed at City Hall, Peabody City Clerk's office. You presenting?
Good evening. My name is Kurt Bellavance. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Peabody. I took some notes down here. There's a lot of information I want to cover in a short period of time, and certainly I'll be up here for answering any questions you may have. The reason I'm here before you this evening is the purpose of revising the zoning ordinance to comply with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, otherwise known as the MBTA law. This would create a multifamily overlay district, which would allow multifamily dwellings by right within the City of Peabody, and also to amend the zoning map to show certain parcels and to create an overlay district for that purpose. Our office has spent several months working with our consultants, RKG Associates and Innis Associates, to create a series of zoning models required by the state and to study and establish a zoning district that complies with the requirements of Section 3A, as well as fits in with the goals, the land use goals of the City of Peabody. The proposed zoning language and map change tonight are entirely new. I'd like to present to you some history and how we got here today, the background, grant and compliance modeling, the zoning language and map change, and what happens if we don't comply. So back in 2021, Governor Baker passed a law requiring that MBTA communities shall have at least one zoning district within the city that is reasonable and allows multifamily housing by right. As a MBTA community, we must comply. The city currently has 3 districts that already allow multifamily by right, but we don't meet all the criteria that's required as part of Section 3A. Though that criteria involves a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. It has to be located not more than half a mile from a commuter rail station, a subway station, or a ferry terminal. That doesn't apply to the City of Peabody, and we're considered an adjacent community. There can't be any age restrictions, and it has to be suitable for families and with children. The minimum land area that we have to present is 50 acres. And one district has to be at least 50% of that 50 acres. So a minimum of 25 acres. And then the percentage of the total housing units that we have to show that can be created is based on our existing housing units, which was 23,190. So we have to show 2,319 units can be built. So once the law had passed in 2021, our office began gathering information in regards to that. We attended webinars. We met with our city solicitor to discuss the law. And then we went to more webinars. But we needed to begin the compliance process, which was required in the law. So I presented before the City Council in May of 2022. And then we submitted our compliance plan to the state on June of 2022. Then we started to apply for different grants, along with many other communities in the Commonwealth. We were successful enough to get a grant to help us with the modeling, which, as I mentioned, is required as part of the submission for acceptance. In the meantime, the state created guidelines while all this was going on. They released those guidelines in August of 2022. They revised them again in October of 2022. And then they revised them again in August of 2023. So it was sort of a moving target as we planned this ahead. So when we hired RKG and Innes Associates to take a look at the modeling that we could do for different zoning, we identified the areas that we could already zone multifamily, which was R3, R4, and DDD, the residential overlay portion of DDD. Then we also looked at a few others, R5 and BC, and other ones that we may need to use or review. What we had to do is we had to then plug into this model that RKG had the setbacks, floor area ratio, parking requirements, lot coverage, height, everything that can determine that you review during site plan and how you can build on a particular property. They had to show that the unit count of 2,319 units could be done on these properties that we were presenting. So we looked at dozens of different models in regards to that and what would work and what didn't work. And what we did was we ended up narrowing it down to creating zoning parameters. So what we did was we plugged in certain setbacks, floor area ratio, height, parking ratios, and everything into a particular form, and then started plugging that model into different properties throughout. In the meantime, Innes Associates, working with RKG, was creating the zoning language for us. What we ended up focusing on was the Dearborn Road area. That's part of the DDD, Residential Overlay District. That seemed to be the most conducive area for this. What we did was we focused on the property over there that could be developed. We looked at vacant land as well as the land that was already developed. And we proposed that section to the City Council before their Industrial and Community Development Subcommittee. They had asked us to take another look at other properties that were more developed because most of that land, or at least a portion of that land, was already undeveloped. And they were a little nervous about creating additional units that we didn't need to. So we went back to the drawing board and we started looking at other districts. Salem Country Club was one of them that we looked at. But the issue that we ran into that was we have to use the parcel that we can't cut parcels up. So we had to look at the entire Salem Country Club site, which I believe is about 360 acres. So we would have had to create multifamily zoning on 360 acres, far above what we were required to do. So we quickly pulled that back and started focusing on some other areas. And one of them was Brooksby Village. As we all know, Brooksby Village is allowed to have residential as part of their continuum care program. So this wouldn't change that. They would still remain to have that zoning. But as we provided this overlay, it seemed to fit in great with what our modeling was. And what it actually did was it allowed us to lower the density into the modeling for the zoning. So it actually worked out very well in regards to that. And when we took the zoning and we took the overlay districts that are before you tonight, there's 2 properties on Dearborn and the one other property, which is Brooksby Village. We show a creation that meets the number of units we need to do, the 2,319. But existing already on those two locations, there's already approximately, I'm going to look at the number here. There's 626 units on Dearborn and 1,572 on Brooksby. So if we were to add additional units to that, we'd have 80 new units at Dearborn and 58 units at Brooksby. So a total of 138 new possible units. The law doesn't require us to build those units, it just allows us to show that they could be built. So that's what we put together. I went back to the City Council and in the Industrial and Community Development Subcommittee and presented that. They made a favorable recommendation to move forward with that zoning proposal. Part of that requirement is to come back to the planning board and present to you as part of a recommendation that we seek to go before back to the City Council with a positive recommendation. So as I mentioned, we looked at creating a new zoning district and new zoning language. So what we have before you this evening as part of the zoning ordinance, we're looking to create the two new districts. One is on Dearborn Road containing 2 lots and the other one is Brooksby Village. As part of that language, we took a look at kind of a combination of our residential overlay district and the DDD residential overlay, and we took the really the dimensions from the DDD and the design standards from the residential overlay and combined those to create this new zoning language. What was key about that was putting in development standards in regard to any future development of those sites. The other key, or the other piece of that is we kept in our inclusionary zoning. So part of the MBTA zoning, it's not required to have inclusionary zoning. And what they do is they allow you to have at least 10%, but anything above that would require an economic feasibility study. We felt that that wasn't, it was an additional cost for us, an additional grant we'd have to apply for. We thought that would be something that we could look at later on down the road. So we left in the piece that we wanted to keep the inclusionary zoning for 10%, which is 5% less than our regular inclusionary zoning. So as part of this proposal, there are 3 areas in regards to the zoning. One is where we need to amend the district descriptions, which is section 3.2, where we have multifamily, and we would change that to incorporate the multifamily overlay district language. Then we would remove the DDD residential overlay piece, which is section 6.68, and would replace that with a new section, the multifamily overlay district, which would be section 6.17. And then the last piece of that would be to amend the zoning map to include the 2 new districts to show that visually on the zoning map. The last piece that I said I would mention is what happens if we don't comply. I know there's a lot of news about other communities not applying. One, for example, is Milton. What I'm here to say is we're not like Milton. This zoning was created for places like Milton that don't want any multifamily housing. The city of Peabody already has thousands of multifamily units within the city. We're providing a district that is creating roughly 138 new units if those projects choose to do that. It's highly unlikely that Brooksby would, because they can't use the continuum care and this at the same time. So, and then this would include inclusionary zoning, which neither Dearborn Road nor Brooksby has. So we don't think it's something that they would be too interested in. I did send a letter to each property owner describing what we were doing. I left my information and asked them if they wanted to call me or speak to me. Happy to do so. We had 2 public hearings coming up, the one tonight and the one next week. I have not heard back from either of those property owners. The other one, as I mentioned a few times, is we're not required to build these units. We're just required to demonstrate that we could if it was necessary. And I think we're pretty clear at doing that. And as I mentioned, it's only we're looking at 138 total new units if this ended up moving forward and someone decided to build, which we don't think is likely. But the last big piece of that is grants. So the state is very specific at not allowing communities that don't comply to seek state grants. I provided a list of the grants that we've received in the last 10 years, just state grants in just the Community Development Office. That's about $9.6 million in grants. And that also led us, once we get a grant, we typically try to work that into achieving other grants. I'm going to try to see my notes here, if I can read the number right. And adding that, taking the 9.6 million grants that we excuse the word, parlay that into almost $16 million worth of grants in the last 10 years. In fact, we received a grant about a month ago from Mass Development for $65,000 to take a look at the zoning up at Centennial Park. And within that letter that we were awarded the grant, said if we don't comply, they're not going to give us the grant. Then the other piece is that the state just passed the economic bond bill. And within that bond bill, they listed several grants that will be available. They have $400 million for MassWorks, $100 million for local economic development grants, $30 million for brownfields redevelopment, and $10 million for downtown vitality. And those are all 4 grants that our office would apply for, and actually 2 of them we've already targeted for the upcoming years to apply for. So that's where the city of Peabody would stand if we did not comply with the requirements of the MBTA 3A zoning. We feel pretty comfortable. We felt good that the city council made a positive recommendation to move forward and that we put together a good product to submit to the state to be in compliance. And in summary, I'm just here to answer any questions that the board may have, anything specific in regards to the zoning, anything specific in regards to the MBTA zoning, or anything else you can come up with, but I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Have any questions from the board? Dr. Otto?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a copy of the actual language, Kurt, so I'm struggling to work out the numbers here. Is the state requiring us to add the possibility of 138 dwelling units? Is that what the net would be? Or does it include the units that are already at those 2 properties?
Yeah, so the language requires that we zone a district that shows that 2,300 units can be built. Whether they are built or not built, the state doesn't care. We're showing, we place these on districts that already have multifamily so that the net would be 138 if either one of these property owners decided they wanted to build more.
So in the best case scenario, the city of Peabody would contribute 138 units to the state's housing stock, but in reality, that's not likely to happen.
Correct. And it's broken down where it would be 58 new units at Brooksby, and then it would be 80 units at Dearborn. And the 2 lots at Dearborn, we have Dearborn Heights, and then we have Jayden, which is the brand new one. Jayden wouldn't be able to, their density is already higher than what would be allowed. So it would only be the Dearborn that would be able to add those units if they decide to build a building or not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. Mr. Bellavance, I generally have a distaste for what the state is trying to do to all these cities and towns. You know, especially where our only affiliation to the MBTA is some bus routes that traverse the city, right? Whether they're going from Danvers to the North Shore Mall, they're going to end up in Lynn, or they're going to ultimately end up at Haymarket Square. But it seems to me that you did wonderful work, and you did a ton of research. It just seems like the state is going to look at this and say that it's pretty disingenuous that you're bobbing and weaving and zigging and zagging and really probably none are going to get built. But you've met the letter of the law, I guess, as it's written right now. So if enough of these communities zig and zag, bob and weave, then the state will probably come out with harsher rules. So I guess I'm prepared to vote in favor of the recommendation, but it's very distasteful, the whole concept. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, you're right, and I know for a fact Salem and Beverly zoned districts that they already had housing, so there won't be any new additional units in Beverly or Salem. And as I mentioned earlier, it's communities like Milton that have been fighting for multifamily housing, not allowing 40Bs and that type of stuff, that we feel that that's what the state is aiming towards for those communities, and not places like Peabody, Salem, Beverly, Lynn, places like that we're already doing our fair share.
Any other questions from the board?
I just have a comment, and I want to thank Kurt Bellavance for his presentation. And my comment is, I was expecting a far more bitter pill to swallow, and then this bobbing and weaving, it does seem to cover the gist of the problem. So I guess I would be in favor of this evening too.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just so I understand how this is going to work. You mentioned that there are 23,000 some odd residential dwellings in the city, and we need to devote 10% of that number to multifamily housing. And do you know what the number of multifamily housing currently in existence is in the city? Number of units?
I don't know. I meant to look up that because I figured someone might ask about that. We have, there's dozens and dozens of multifamily projects or housing units in the city scattered throughout, whether they're townhouse, condos, apartments.
I guess I don't need to know the number, but my
It's high.
My question is whether or not combining the number of multifamily units that exist already in Brooksby and that exist already in Dearborn and adding 158 to that brings you up to the 10%. Is that what's happening here, or am I misunderstanding?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? At this time, if there's anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this, please come to the podium. Having none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition, either online or in present? Hearing none, at this time I'll accept the motion.
Just as a reminder to the board, this is just a recommendation to the city council upon this memo and request by Mr. Bellavance.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend to the City Council to adopt the zoning overlay district presented to us this evening to cover the MBTA 3A zoning. So moved.
Second.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Joseph Gagnon,
Yes.
Mr. John Ford,
Yes.
Attorney Peter Evanites,
Yes.
Dr. Judith Otto,
No.
Mr. Matthew Genzali,
Yes.
Mr. Roy Simos,
Yes.
Mr. Dennis Feld. He said yes. Mr. Sean Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Tom French,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas Betancourt.
Yes. Motion carried.
Just before we continue, we do need a motion to also recommend approval of the zoning map as will now be changed due to the new overlay districts. So if that could also be added as a new motion and then voted upon.
The new zoning is not enacted yet. It still has to go before the council.
Exactly, but Mr. Bellavance is proposing a new zoning map due to the changes. So we would look for, or the Community Development Department would look for a recommendation from the Planning Board about accepting the proposed change zoning map.
Mr. Chairman, move the board accept the new zoning change map with the new...
No, not, it wouldn't be accepting. We'd move to recommend acceptance.
Move recommend acceptance of the new zoning map with the new zoning overlay district.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I have a question. I think we're bringing the cart before the horse here. I don't think that we should move on this until after this has gone through City Council, and City Council has approved this.
So Mr. Bellavance, he can explain as well, but so Mr. Bellavance, as this public notice was written, as he was looking to, Mr. Bellavance, the city is looking to amend the zoning in two different ways, in that creating the multifamily overlay district and changing the description of the zoning districts, as well as third to that, it would be changing the zoning map, which would just be the same as what we just voted to recommend approval on. All we're doing is that we voted to recommend the language, now you're voting to recommend it kind of being physically shown on the zoning map as well. There has been a motion on the floor by Mr. Ford.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
I'll take another roll call, please.
Mr. Joseph Gagnon,
Yes.
Mr. John Ford,
Yes.
Attorney Pete Arvanites.
Yes.
Dr. Judith Otto,
No.
Mr. Matthew Genzali,
Yes.
Mr. Roy Simos,
Yes.
Mr. Dennis Feld. Okay. Mr. Sean Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Tom French,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas Betancourt.
Yes. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be appearing before the City Council next week with your recommendation, and then the City Council hopefully will be taking action next Thursday. Thank you.
At this time, I'll close that public hearing and enter into a new public hearing. Notice is hereby given under the provisions of Massachusetts Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C. The Peabody Planning Board will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 5th, 2024, around 7 p.m. in Wigan Auditorium, City Hall, Peabody, to consider application by Salem Country Club, owner of the property located at 133 Forest Street, to consider the show the assessors map lot 059 parcel 81X, removal of trees along designated scenic road. Copy of the plan is available for viewing Community Development Office during normal business hours. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Certainly. Barry Fogel from Keegan Whirlin on behalf of the Salem Country Club. Bill Rocco, the superintendent of grounds, apologizes he couldn't make it tonight. He had intended to, but was called away. This is an application. You may remember when we were here last, you folks asked if some of the stone wall along Forest Street could be rebuilt near where the sixth hole is, and you said you might have the application. There's a map right there. So to orient you, Forest Street is that black line running right to left, and there are 3 holes on the south side of Forest Street, 6, 7, and 8, and where the red arrow is pointing, the 2 red lines also correspond to an area where the stone wall had been hit by a couple of vehicles, I think, and it was sort of fallen down. So when we here talking to you about some tree removal, you asked, could the club rebuild their wall in that area, and they did. And we applied to you for that, and we did that. There are 4 dead oak trees in that area, and the club is prepared to remove those trees. We communicated with your city tree warden, and he supports that and signed off on the application. 2 of them might be on your side of the wall, 2 of them are, one's in the wall, you can see there, and 1 is on the club side. But according to the club, there are a lot of trees on Forest Street that are compromised, either dead or have dead limbs. When they fall without being maintained in the street, you guys have to respond on an emergency basis, meaning the city. So they're actually, and when they fall in the direction of the club, they're near the cart path or golfers or whatever else. So these 4 are intended for removal now. We've applied to the Conservation Commission under their tree policy and got their approval for this, contingent on getting your approval under the scenic road statute. So we're here tonight to request your approval to remove those 4 trees. I have a separate request or introduction of a request regarding sort of longer-term cooperation on tree maintenance along that section of Forest Street all the way down to the entrance to the club. But let's take one at a time. We're asking for your approval for this to be conducted, and it would happen probably this month. They've got Arbor Tree prepared to come in and do that. So we're asking for your approval on that, and then I'm happy to talk to you about the longer-term issue. Answer any questions you have.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would just recommend or request that upon removal of the tree that's within the wall, that when that is all rebuilt, that, the wall is rebuilt in the exactly way that it was before, and that, the location is not to shift or change or anything of that matter.
Certainly.
This time I'll accept the motion. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of removal of the trees? Anyone here wishing to speak in opposition of removal of the trees?
If you would like to speak online, oh, and then we have somebody raising their hand.
There's a lady. Please introduce yourself and your address, please.
Yes, Beverly Ann Griffin Dunn, 10 Colfax Street, Peabody. I am not in opposition to the removal of the 4 trees. Now that I know it's only 4, I'll be honest, I'm here in honor of Bill Toomey, because I remember how Mr. Toomey fought so hard to have Forest Street designated as a scenic byway, and the reason for that was because of all the trees along the road. So I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be something very targeted and small, and to make sure that it is maintained as a scenic byway. So thank you. Thank you.
Somebody online wishing to speak in opposition?
Hi, Susan, can you hear us?
Hello. Excuse me. I just would like to see us look at alternatives.
Oh, excuse me, before you continue, can you just, for the record, please state your name and address?
Of course. I'm Susan Smaller, 3 Loman Circle. And I am interested in the city pursuing how we can get, whenever a tree is removed, for whatever reason, we replant that elsewhere, especially when we have people coming to take out trees who have illegally taken out trees in the past. I think that we need to be more forward-thinking about the value of a tree with carbon removal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to comment. I just want to point out these are 4 dead trees, so we're not removing any live trees. I would also add, in response to both sets of comments, that in some areas, when a dead tree is removed, some of the other trees that are smaller in that area get more sunlight and have the capacity of growing into larger trees. So it's actually both better for public safety to not have a dead tree along the scenic road, but we're not removing any live trees.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question. This might be something obvious, but the trees that you're cutting down, you're also going to remove the stumps, so stump grinding them down, because I know that there's a couple of them that are on the road there, so the hazard is basically from the stump, so if you don't remove that, the car could still hit that. So will you be removing the stumps as well?
I'd have to check with the club on that. I don't know that they're thinking of grinding the stumps, except for the one in the wall. But the issue they're concerned about is the tree itself falling either in the road or onto the club, not for, if the city wants to get into grinding stumps for automobile safety, we can talk to the tree warden about that and try to find a way to do it. I don't know, as I stand here, whether the club was planning on having those stumps ground.
Yeah, so typically, when you cut a tree down, the tree, surgeon, or whatever you want to call them, usually they cut it down probably about a foot or so. It's still showing about a foot or so. So if a car hit that tree before, chances are, if you have a stump that's raised up about a foot or a foot and a half, it's still a hazard for a car to hit. And that's my point. If anything on the road, if you take down that tree, another condition would be that you either remove the stump by backhoe or just grind it down. I mean, it just makes sense to eliminate the hazard. And like I said, the hazard is probably the first foot or two above ground.
If I may, the club's doing the city a favor taking down a dead tree on its right-of-way. So I'll talk to them about it, but I know one of their reactions may be, then we'll leave the tree. But I'll also carry that point forward with them. And, but this was the issue of the wall was where cars had hit it and knocked the stones off. They weren't talking about cars hitting the trees.
I had a question.
Sure.
As I look at the photograph, you mentioned one of the trees that's going to be removed is in the wall. And I do see a photograph of a relatively large tree that's in the wall, if that's the one you're referring to, if you know what I'm talking about.
I do know the one you're talking about. Can you call up those pictures?
So in the bottom right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to dismantle the wall to remove the tree? Looks like it's smack in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think it's this one is right next to it.
Well, the one
I don't know if the one behind it is.
the one that in the foreground is not in the wall. It's adjacent to the wall.
I think there was another one. That one is outside on the right-of-way side. The lower left, Drew? What's in the lower left? That might be the same one. I'm sure it would be a sequence where if they're not going to take the wall apart to get at the tree, I think.
Well, I would
at
just,
the moment.
I'm certainly vote in favor of this, but I would ask that any tree removal that requires dismantling of all or part of the wall in that area, the wall be replaced the way it was.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the wall is, we've determined that the walls are on the Salem Country Club property. So they also, for aesthetic reasons, they want that
I understand.
restored, absolutely.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion.
Just briefly, I'm sure the club wouldn't be opposed to, or their arborist, to cutting those stumps as close to the ground level as possible. Would that be?
Correct. Yep.
And they will restore any disturbed portions of the wall, correct?
Correct.
Very good. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would move to allow the Salem Country Club to remove 4 oak trees in the scenic road section of Forest Street with the condition that they cut the tree to the ground level as close as possible and restore any disturbed sections of the stone wall. So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Joseph Gagnon?
Yes.
Mr. John Ford?
Yes.
Attorney Peter Arvanites?
Yes.
Dr. Judith Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Matthew Gonzali?
Yes.
Mr. Roy Simos?
Yes.
Mr. Dennis Feld? Mr. Sean Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Tom French?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas Betancourt?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. While I have your attention, I will just say we're going to be communicating with the tree warden because there are other dead trees or trees with dead large limbs over your side of the wall or at the club. So rather than coming in, one of the reasons we limited it to this number is because this area is in the buffer zone of a wetland resource on the north side of Forest Street. So we went to the Conservation Commission under their tree policy. Other large sections of Forest Street on that figure, in fact, Drew, if you could call that up again, it's worth just another minute of your time. So those gray blobs are the buffer zones of wetland resources that are in green. So if you look further down from the number 6, there's no buffer zone because there are no wetlands. So we wouldn't be needing to limit the number of trees removed to the Conservation Commission's limit of 5 that they allow for any under their tree policy. So we're going to talk to the tree warden about basically cleaning up the dead stuff on Forest Street for both public safety and course safety and aesthetics as well. And to your comment, ma'am, and to the lady's comment on the phone, it will help other vegetation grow and sort of make it more scenic. Dead tree doesn't really add much to the scenic value of the road. So thank you again for the approval, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Close that public hearing, and at this time return to the planning board meeting. Agenda A, approval of the minutes. What minutes were these? Next item on the agenda is A&R Land Court. Have none. Site building permit plan review, 15 Newbury Street.
Mr. Chairman, in the matter of 15 Newbury Street, as everybody here has remembered, this has been out to peer review in regards to the water system. We finally this week got back the peer review in regards to the water system, in which there was very minimum questions or concerns in which Weston and Sampson had in regards to this project. Since then, I have met with the engineer, Mr. York, for 15 Newbury Street, as well as City of Peabody engineer, Mr. Nicholas. We discussed the project in detail and in depth, as Mr. Nicholas was not the original reviewer of this project. The applicant has received back traffic in which they had met all of the concerns in which the traffic peer reviewer had brought up. There was a stormwater report that was brought to peer review, and they received comments back, many of which are minimal things, does not require many big changes. So long story short, the applicant is working on revising their plans, providing the final information to the Department of Engineering, and they have asked for a continuance to our January 16th meeting, and I believe there is a late ad email in your packets on your desk from that applicant requesting such.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to receive a late communication from Christopher York, P.E., in the matter of 15 Newbury Street. The date on the communication is December 3rd, 2024 at 10:23 a.m., and it is requesting a continuance until January 16th. Move to receive and grant said extension of time.
Second.
Next item on the agenda is appointments. Is Jack here for something?
No, there needs to, you need a vote on the request for continuance.
Oh, have second on that motion, please. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you.
Okay.
Jack?
He is, yeah. That's the last thing. Yeah, no, so we're on appointments now, so attorney. You'll also notice in your appointments, Attorney Ankleys, as part of the 2018 filing for the project over at the North Shore Mall, submitted to the planning board as he had said that he would do back in 2018 when that project was being approved, provide as-built at the end when the project was completely built out. Attorney Ankleys has provided those to the board, and they've been submitted as part of your packet. Attorney Ankleys was going to attend tonight, but then decided that he did not think that it was mostly needed, but he did want to just make sure that the board had those plans.
2 was Salem Country Club. 3 was letter from Paul DiBiase, manager of Peabody Living LLC, dated November 26, 2024,
Yep.
referencing Stonegate.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, in regards to that, the applicants over and developers over at the Stonegate subdivision have submitted to the board as-built as well as easement acceptance. And they are currently being reviewed by Department of Public Services. In your application, you'll see there's a letter from engineering in regards to that they have received these as-built and all the submitted documents. They are just currently reviewing them and have not provided a final review on them yet. And then you'll also see in there as well that the applicant, the DBICs have requested to be put on the next planning board agenda, whether that be January 2nd or January 16th as specified in that letter. So if the board wishes to vote to move this, continue this until the next planning board agenda as duly posted, then I think that is adequate.
So moved.
Unfortunately, I cannot make a motion. Someone from the planning board will need to make that said motion.
Mr. Chairman, on the matter of Stonegate subdivision, I would move to defer this until the next first meeting in January.
I guess this would lead to something that was brought up in other matters probably before the board. I was going to talk about the planning board's agenda currently coming up in the first January meeting, and that it falls the day after New Year's in regards to the city hall closures that week and the week prior. So I was going to bring up potentially canceling that meeting, as this would be the only thing on the said agenda, and moving to the January 16th. That's why she put in the email the next agenda.
Is that motion sufficient, or first meeting?
I'd probably put in there instead the first meeting agenda, or I would put in there, yeah, you could put in a specific date.
I withdraw my motion and will restate it. In a matter of Stonegate subdivision, I would move to defer this until the January 16th, 2025 meeting.
Second.
Yep. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
And then finally, Mr. Chairman, other matters probably before the board, Attorney Kelty had reached out to me earlier today in regards to a request, and requested to come in front of the board this evening as part of others matters properly before the board to discuss with us a former subdivision and property that he is representing a client for. There's a letter in your packets that it would be a late ad in regards to 27 Blackstone, which is the address that Attorney Kelty is here to discuss with the board this evening, if they so choose to accept the late ad and discuss with Attorney Kelty.
Mr. Chairman, move to receive a late ad from Attorney John Kelty dated August 28th in regards to 27 Blackstone Street, Lot 05-025.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess I'm actually a matter improperly before the board this evening, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. As Andrew has pointed out, there is a memorandum which is dated August 28th, 2024. I thought at that time when I developed that memorandum that I forwarded over to the building commissioner, and that in my mind we had a discussion about the existence of this lot, and that this lot fit within the pertinent sections of a section of the law which was signed by the governor, which essentially makes this lot buildable and sets aside certain circumstances with respect to merged lots. That issue is before the building commissioner. I spoke with the commissioner this evening. He has referred it out to Donald Kahn when we were in the process of applying. So I'm not asking the board to opine on I thought I'd share the memorandum that creates this lot with the board. When we were applying for a building permit to develop the lot, we've been through Concom, and the question arose about the size of the lot. That's what the memorandum was submitted for. But the other question was from Public Services Department, who questioned the access to the lot. And I brought a couple of larger size plans. The plan that you have before you, I'm asking the planning board tonight to comment on the access. The pavement stops short of this lot, makes the bend. The pavement stops at immediately adjacent to Mrs. Alamonte's driveway. So what we've done on this plan is we've shown an extension of pavement 43 feet from the end of the existing pavement to a point beyond our driveway. Beyond that point, you see on the plan that there is wetlands, and so we've ended our roadway right at the driveway, and we represented to the Concom that we would not go beyond that point so as not to interfere with the wetlands, and we were given an approval. Mr. Politz has asked before he signed off on the permit, he asked about the recommendations, comments, notes provided by the planning board on the access. And it is not on this plan, but I believe it would be appropriate that if the planning board is satisfied that the presence of the wetland causes us to expect that there be no further development beyond this lot, and that the pavement being continued from a point to an extent of 43 feet, that this plan also shows, which is copy with you, that also shows an area which would be the extension of the sidewalk and the extension of the roadway, as I said, 43 feet. There is no detail for the depth of pavement for the, and I believe that an appropriate comment or recommendation from the planning board would be that the sidewalk be built and that provided, and that the extension of this roadway be in accordance with the rules and regulations of the planning board with respect to gravel extent of the depth of pavement, etc. And it is a bituminous sidewalk on Blackstone Street, and that we be allowed to continue a bituminous sidewalk in the area that is provided on the plan for a sidewalk. And that area shows as a to the left of the existing driveway and extending to our driveway. So it extends from the Alamonte's currently occupied property onto this property and ends at the driveway. If there are other conditions or recommendations that the board would make with respect to type and style of construction, I'm happy to consider them and to respond to them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to provide the following comments from community development here. We just received this today, all this information. We're still reviewing it. I briefly chatted with Mr. Politz about this a couple weeks ago before this became even on my radar in regards to this. I think what Attorney Kelty is showing works if you were to build out the whole entire roadway, as if you look at the original plan, they were going to build a cul-de-sac in the end, turnaround in the end. I believe at this point, Mr. Politz is really just looking for the planning board to say, well, what do you want them to do, whether it's build a roadway all the way out or not, I think this is very similar to the same situation that we ran into with 18 Corral Road as well, where there was one single lot with no roadway, or it was once an approved roadway, what to do. I think the only difference is that that was one lot that could only be built upon. There is other lots there, but as Attorney Kelty had mentioned, that they probably will never get built upon as there's wetlands that are in the back. I think this one is a tricky situation in that originally the roadway was supposed to be built, but originally the roadway was supposed to be built like this because it was going to continue to a cul-de-sac. Right now, it'll just end at a driveway. I think that, I don't know if the planning board should recommend this plan as shown, because I don't know if Department of Public Services wants to make some sort of area for snow to go there or something like that. So I think if the planning board was to make any recommendation, I would recommend that it be based upon satisfaction or to the satisfaction of the Department of Engineering in regards to this roadway.
I do think also that the planning board should recommend the spec, depth, pavement, et cetera.
Yeah, I think to Mr. Attorney Kelty's point.
Because it's not
is
shown
that,
on this plan.
Yeah, to Attorney Kelty's point, that I would state that the board, if the board was to recommend anything, which again, this was just submitted this evening. We've also, in regards to the matter with the memo that Attorney Kelty submitted, we had also just forwarded that to Attorney Khan today as well, who's reviewing it. He's provided no input so far on this. I would say that this board recommends that if they choose to do so, that it would recommend anything upon building a roadway that is satisfactory to the Department of Public Services and meets the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, which could run into an issue, though, for you, Attorney Kelty, because those subdivision rules and regulations of land don't allow dead-end streets that just end like that. So I guess what this would run into, again, I think we're in a weird situation, is that I know Mr. Pollitt is looking for our recommendation on this, but I'm more nervous as to, I think there needs to be a little bit more thought put into what the end of this road is going to look like, of which we need Department of Public Services comment on.
Drew, do you have a plan you can put up on the big screen?
I do.
Please. Through the chair.
So the road, when we extend it the 43 feet, it really has the same ending as it has today, except a little 43 feet deeper. There is no cul-de-sac today. The end of the roadway is the bend in the street itself, and there's a entryway to Mrs. Alamonte's driveway, or the Alamonte family driveway, and then that would be extended some. So.
And this plan was approved by the Conservation Commission?
Yes.
Excuse me?
And they spoke to the issue of snow removal and matters such as that.
Was this plan reviewed by the Department of Public Services?
It was peer-reviewed for the Conservation Commission. This one was done, I believe, by Mr. Langley for the Conservation Commission. And when I think there was no comment from Public Services when we were at Conservation, and then comments were looked for by Mr. Pollitt, understandably, from the Planning Board. And I think that we first expected, before the law was passed, that this may need to be before the Board of Appeals. And that turned out we don't need to, so we never came to the Planning Board to create the lot.
Through the chair. Jack, just a little confused about a couple things. You speak about the 125 feet of frontage. If you're only extending the road 43 feet, how are you achieving 125 feet of frontage on this lot? Or am I misunderstanding your paragraph?
The discussion I had much earlier with the building commissioner was that the frontage is as on the original plan. It's a 15,000 square foot lot with 125 feet of frontage, paper though it be. We then, rather than build out the entire 125 feet because of the presence of the wetland, we stopped it short. The statute doesn't provide, and I think that what Mr. Politz is pointing toward is if you had seen this as a A&R plan, the question of adequate access would come forward. And the question is whether that extent of pavement connecting to the driveway with the sidewalk, whether that provides adequate access.
I mean, I don't know the definition of frontage, but doesn't it seem to imply that it's 125 feet of the front property line adjacent to a roadway? What else would, I don't understand how so frontage
there's paper frontage, and from a zoning standpoint, there is frontage. Now the question is practical application of that frontage, and that becomes a question of, as Mr. Politz framed it, that becomes a question of the adequacy of the access.
I mean, I think just in comment, I think the 90-degree sort of angle of the roadway stopping at the very limit of the edge of the driveway seems a bit abrupt. I think maybe if there was anything that could be done to like ease that a little bit, it might make for a nicer aesthetic than to just have, I'm assuming, a wooded, just dead end, if you will, really, really abruptly.
It's a dead end now.
Maybe there's a way to make it
if you don't make the left, it's a dead end today.
Maybe it could look a little more gradual than just this 90-degree, very linear turn, but in any event. And then also your other paragraph about the combination of the lots and then the separation of the lots. Could you just, I know we're not really getting into this tonight, I don't think, but could you just explain that a little bit? What happened when it merged with Ms. Zellman's
The
lot?
statute, the law used to provide that if there were lots held in common ownership, approved by the planning board, and then subsequently the zoning changes and you required to have larger lots, the assessor's department would merge the lots in order to and show them as in common ownership. You would lose the lot lines on the basis that the zone change, you no longer had those. So people used to checkerboard lots, which is to, Ralph W. Smith would own the one on the left, Tommy Jones would own the one on the right, and you could preserve them from the merger doctrine. These folks took them in the same fashion after a zone change made them non-conforming, but now the statute change puts us back in a position where these lots do in fact exist, and the interpretation of that has been sent by the building commissioner to city solicitor for a recommendation.
I think much of what this memo is referring to is going to have to taken up with the building inspector when they try to file a building permit to build this house. I think what Attorney Kelty here is just really looking for this evening is what the planning board would like to see this roadway look like in regards to, if I guess like the one fear would be is we tell Attorney Kelty that this is how we want to build the roadway. He goes and builds that roadway, and then, but I mean, that would be on his concern if they can't build that house at that point. So they have to wait for the building permit anyways. I would have to believe before acting upon whatever the planning board recommends.
The adjacent lot used to be the last lot on the street. And then actually this began a number of years ago with the Alamonte's son, Christopher, dumping materials onto the Barden Trimount Essex bituminous land, which was formerly owned this. As part of the settlement with respect to the cleanup that the Conservation Commission ordered, the Alamontes, since they were the culprit, agreed to buy the lot, and which they did, and they did the cleanup. So now there's compliance with the Concom. Some years later, we come forward, they want to sell the lot. Mrs. Doris Alamonte has passed. Her kids are going to retain the household, but they want to sell the lot. I hear on behalf of the new guy.
It's relatively convenient that, you did something illegal on the lot that caused you to take ownership of it, and then you get to build a lot on, then you get to build a house on it. That's a unique twist.
It's sort of important to note the sewer line extends beyond us. You can see that's on the edge of our lot line. And then there's a sewer easement that passes through this lot, which we're subject to, and that sewer line actually exists. If we were to be required to build a regulation cul-de-sac, we don't own the land across the street from us, so the turning radius would be difficult to make on the city-owned land or on our land. If the board thought that a grant of some kind of easement to be able to turn around in the driveway, we could consider that certainly, but given the fact that the hydrants are in such close proximity to this lot and that the ability to turn off the roadway down to Glen Drive, actually Glen Drive is kind of up. Blackstone is off of Russell Street down below. And so I think that a cul-de-sac is impractical and not doable. And I think that to the extent that public safety apparatus is able to negotiate between Blackstone Street and Glen Road, they will remain in such proximity to this dwelling that I don't think there's any difficulty with respect to public safety presented.
Through the chair, just my comment. I don't see anything wrong with this. We did it on Corral. It's extended one lot, extended a portion of a lot. They have ready access. They have a hammerhead cul-de-sac, a hammerhead turn built into the driveway. And it'll be taxes paid to the city in perpetuity. So I don't see a problem with this.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, sorry, if I just may, I would just recommend that I think this is a really peculiar incident. It's funny that this has come up now twice in the past 6 months, but this was originally supposed to be a full subdivision. If you look at our GIS, you'll see that this is including a paper street. I think this puts the board in a position where really what Attorney Kelty is looking for is just our guidance, and that do we believe that this subdivision, which seems unlikely to be built fully out as there's a wetland that goes directly in where the roadway exists today, and that this property is all owned by the company that owns, I believe, the quarry next door. Does the planning board feel that this roadway should be extended in the way that it was originally proposed back in, I think it was 1920 when this subdivision was originally proposed, or does the planning board feel necessary that they can just build the roadway as shown today? I would say any recommendation, though, should probably be along the lines of something to do with would the roadway to be built in accordance in satisfaction of DPW. I think this runs like a situation where, Will and I have not talked at depth about this because Will has been waiting for what the planning board wants, I think, before he really weighs in on what would be built. I think he was waiting in case the planning board said, no, please build out an entire roadway all the way across or not. So I think this will come down to really the Department of Engineering reviewing this and then providing comment to the applicant. So I would recommend to the board that they, if they so choose to make any recommendation, be upon satisfaction of the department or in accordance with the Department of Public Services requirements.
Attorney Kelty, how wide is Blackstone Street? How many years ago was that built?
That's an 88 plan? The underlying plan is, for the layout is, where's my glasses? Can you read that? Yes. Well, layout. So it's usually 24 feet with sidewalks on both sides. So that's why Eastern Land Survey showed the 24 feet of pavement plus the sidewalk. But the sidewalk is only on one side.
In your communication with Conservation, what were their comments about snow being pushed into the wetland or anything like that?
We weren't. In fact, that was part of the reason we left it short. We're quite a few feet short of the actual resource area, and they don't want us pushing, the city plows pushing everything into there. But there is an area right at the end of the pavement, just beyond the driveway, where there, at least my client's snow could go. I think the expectation is that my client would plow their driveway and this section of the roadway that's in front of their house, and the public vehicles would make the turn as they do today and really kind of skip over us.
At this time, will there be any motion on this request from Mr. Kelty?
As just a reminder, this was submitted to the board this evening. This is all of your first time looking at it. I mean, Attorney Kelty is here looking for clearly some sort of recommendation by the board. That does not mean that the board needs to vote on this evening, and if they wish to continue until they hear further feedback, that's also an option. They could also vote, determine that, or they could also vote to require the roadway be built as shown on the plan. You could also vote to require that the roadway be built in satisfactory requirements of Department of Public Services. I mean, so there's some options that are on the table.
My personal feeling is to dictate that it be built to planning board specifications should be added. Otherwise, someone might go out and just build hot top, no underlayment, et cetera.
If I may.
I'm sorry, that detail isn't on the plan, so I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to say that it should be built to planning board specs.
Attorney Kelty, when you reference planning board specifications, are you referencing the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, or are you referencing something else?
The depth and specifications that are in our rules and regulations, subdivision of land, yes.
Any other further comments or recommendations from the board?
No, I'm not opposed to it. I wouldn't mind a little more feedback from other departments. The roadway should be built to our specs. And the length of the road is, where did you come up with just going to the end of the driveway? Was that worked out with somebody, or?
No, as a practical matter, trying to keep the greatest distance we could from the wetland, and then at the same time trying to accommodate the entry into the lot itself. So we put the driveway on that side, the close side, and then stretch the pavement.
And you would only need a sidewalk on one side, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Normally we require both sides.
Just another question. I know we had referenced snow removal, and your expectation was, depending on what happens here, that municipal snow removal would just continue around the natural curvature of Glen Drive to Blackstone Street, and that the residents that live here at the end of this little offshoot would plow the end of that. What happens if and when they sell that property and the next homeowners decide that the city should be plowing the end of this street? how would snow removal be dealt with that way? I'm just a little confused with the plans here showing that the extension matches the end of the driveway. I'm not sure where snow would go. It just doesn't quite add up to me. Wondering if you could explain that a little further.
If you would repeat the question, maybe not from the top, but
Sure.
what's the short version of that question?
When you reference snow removal, you mentioned that the expectation was that Peabody plows would follow the natural curvature of Glen Drive and Blackstone Street. What is the expectation of the homeowner for the area that is not covered by the natural curvature there?
Homeowners' expectation was, our discussion at the Concom was that the area to the left-hand side, the lower side, which is actually there's a detail provided for, that's a drain, what does Chris call it? It's there's erosion control, recharge trench. Up in the upper left-hand corner, that's a recharge trench that would accept the drainage from the roadway and recharge it into the ground. And our discussion was that snow needing a big place to be stored would be stored on that side of the roadway because the trenching would be there and we would be away from the wetlands. As you can see, there's erosion controls at the end of the roadway and then beyond this trench.
So the expectation is that city plows will not be plowing?
City plow, we don't expect to see them, frankly. I mean, I think that they will continue to make the curvature and the eventual owner will need to connect, essentially. I don't see the city plowing this 40 feet.
I would like to have some clarification here. So I'm looking at the plan right now as shown on the screen. Is this, sorry, I don't need to get to, sorry, let's see, where is it? There we go. Is this area, as I'm highlighting now, sorry, that color is not being seen by anyone. Is this area where there would be a sidewalk, there's going to be no sidewalk? I see that there's a sidewalk here and the driveway. Yes. But then no sidewalk here?
Yes, that's where the sidewalk is intended to be extended. So we'd go from driveway to driveway.
In the hashed area on the left, that's just snow storage, proposed snow storage area?
On the left, it really doesn't show in the plan as proposed storage, but we did have a discussion at the Concom about not pushing it straight, but putting it to the side on that left-hand side.
And this will be a public street, correct?
It will be public because that's public land and it's part of the public layout, but, you know, there's times that it's kind of what you see is what you get. I don't expect to see the city plowing that, but...
Well, actually, I would have the opposite opinion. I think they will pack it down there.
Pardon?
I think they will push it down towards your...
Well, then, in that case, we might be required to put some signage up for the, we are required to put signage up in our order, but most of that is cautioning with the sewer easement and things like that.
I think Mr. Walsh brings up a great point here in that, to your point, Attorney Kelty, we were saying that snowplow trucks are going to follow the curvature of the road. So that may be, let's say this property is sold off to someone new, they show up. I feel like this could run into a incidents where this is a public way, as in it was an approved, yeah, it's an approved subdivision and you're building out the roadway. That's why I think with what they're showing, I know that this was approved by Concom. I really think Department of Public Services needs to weigh in on this and exactly what they want. And I guess to my point in Concom, did Mr. Politz provide any feedback into what he would want to see out there?
Oh, so if you'd like a two-purpose, say that the recommendation would be that it be built to planning board rules and regulation specs, that the sidewalk be provided in the area showed on the plan, and then put it back in his court. You know, add on to the motion and compliance with, and we recommend that it be reviewed by public services and compliance be achieved with their requirements.
Mr. Chairman?
No objection to going back, you know, to see well.
Yeah, I think we should recommend approval, and just like everyone's talking about, have it reviewed and approved by public services. End of discussion. You know, ready for, you know, I mean, I think that's the only way to look at this, and I don't really have a problem with this personally.
Then you want to make a recommendation?
I'll make a motion.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the construction of a driveway as shown on the plan for Dolores Almonte before us today, provided that all roadway construction, driveway construction is done in accordance with the rules and regulations of the planning board for roads, and further provided that it could comply with any recommendations that may be made by the engineering department.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for letting me be before you this evening. Thank you.
Other matters properly before the board, as Drew brought up, our planning board meeting is scheduled for the 2nd of December, and I would like to...
January.
2nd of January, and it doesn't seem reasonable that right after the holiday that we have a meeting, so I would like to get the opinion of the board if we should cancel that meeting. Anybody have any opinions on that, negative or positive?
Just a question. We have nothing tentatively scheduled for the January 2nd meeting?
As of right now, everything's been continued out past then. If the board votes to cancel that meeting, it'd be posted at City Hall, and that if we received anything, it would be just put onto the next agenda.
Except that any A&Rs are subject to a tighter time frame, I think, than we have, right? So if an A&R plan came in, we'd have to have a special meeting to deal with simply that issue at some point within the 20 days of action.
We would have to hold some sort of special meeting.
Yep. Thanks.
Do we have any kind of motion?
Can we just leave it alone and just, you know, and if it needs to be, you know, not, you know, if they want to just do away with the meeting, then at some point in the future, like a week from now or something, when you know there's no A&Rs or whatever coming, or a week or two, you know, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess at that point, it's already been posted that we will not be meeting as a second meeting in January, so I would believe that it would, no second meeting in December. So I think we kind of always run into this potential issue, and that we don't always have a, same as in July, and this year in June due to the holiday. I think we always kind of run into this. I mean, it's up to the board if they wish to cancel the meeting or not. I would say that it would probably need a motion just so we can post it then at City Hall that the January 2nd meeting would be canceled.
Yeah, I just think it'd be easier to cancel a meeting than to call a special meeting, that's all, if we needed to for some reason.
Basically, that would be it, cancel the meeting, then if necessary, you'll have a special meeting. Any motion on that?
I move that we cancel the scheduled planning board meeting for January 2nd,
Second.
2025.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Any other matters properly before the board? Adjournment.
Have a great holiday, and we'll see you in the new year. We just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? wish you all well, and we'll meet on the 12th at our place.
16th.
For our annual get-together. So happy holidays, and see you on the 12th.
And Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.